yesterday, you want to borrow mine. Okay. Yesterday we did Hon Ashir Kiras Uzo Uchachoma Nisgava Bamaskito, right? So I think we settled on the translation of the wealth of the rich person is his fortress of strength, and like a tall wall in his, I think imagination fits best in the way that we learned it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone want to say what they remember of the idea, and we'll try to refine it and tweak it.
I don't really remember what we said.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
No,
That's why we review.
I'm joking. I just listened to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That Usher thinks that his wealth is going to protect him.
Yeah.
But really, it can't really protect him, and may even cause him harm.
Okay, good. That's the basic idea, right? Yeah, and so it can't protect. So we talked a little bit about why it can't protect him. We want to try making a statement about that.
I guess it could also cause people to be jealous of him.
Right. So that's the second half, right? Is that it attracts harm. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. But so why can't it protect him? We also talked. This came up last night also in the Mishlei shiur, right? Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't here, but I could guess.
Yeah, sure.
That there's only so much wealth can do for you. Certain things are just beyond the capacity of wealth.
Right.
If you get sick and there are no ailments for that sickness.
No
medicines.
Yes, yeah.
If there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Okay, good. Right. So number one is that there are inherent limitations on what wealth can actually do and what problems it could actually solve. And it can't stop a hurricane. It can't stop your house from getting burned down. I mean, it could, I guess, decrease the probabilities in terms of other stuff like that. But and then some things it can't solve at all. And then also the wealth itself is not guaranteed to stay with you. So it's not like it can actually you could get it stolen. You could lose the source of income. You can. Yesterday, someone made a good point about it. Hold on. I mean, there were several good points about it. Last night, there was a really good point. I don't remember. But yeah, okay, fine. So wealth has a lot of limitations. I'm sure there are a lot of other pasukim about that. And then the second thing is it makes people jealous. So unlike a fortress that doesn't attack you, wealth, when you take security in wealth, that actually can bring up more problems than you had without it. And I think I mentioned yesterday because we got from the Rabbah the ransom example, right? That still happens today. If you're a rich person and you go to some foreign third world country, like certain countries, you have to be afraid you're going to get kidnapped and held hostage, or your family members also. Yeah. Okay, good. And this is contrasting it to the Shem Hashem, which is a reliable fortress that also affords mobility and either real protection through physical protection through hashgacha, or protection from the from improper or frustrating ways to deal with reality in terms of in your the way you in your psyche. Yeah.
It's the I guess wealth, it can't give you total security, but there are, it could, like we said, it could increase your odds.
Yeah, right. I think, and so that's why I think that the mistake here is it's not saying that wealth doesn't have utility. It's saying that wealth is not the strong fortress that you think it is, in the sense of an absolute protection. Okay. I think that's the moral of the story.
Yeah. There is protection that you can get from it. It's not saying that you can't get any protection from it, but it's not a fortress.
Right. Yeah.
And people relate to it.
Right. Okay, let's do the next pasuk here. Okay, so 18:12. So this one, I believe, became. It says my screen sharing is paused. Hold on. Was it paused the whole time? I don't know. Okay, so this one I think became an English proverb. So we have Lifnei Shever Gaon. Sorry, Lifnei Shever Yigba Lev Ish. Maybe the one I'm thinking was Lifnei Shever Gaon. Okay, Lifnei Shever Yigba Lev Ish Lifnei Kavod Anava. So how would you translate this?
Before either breaking or food.
Yeah, I think breaking is probably the one here. Yeah, although it's interesting. Do you know what the relationship is between Shever and Shever?
Break bread.
Is that really it?
I think it is.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So before breaking, you will be elevated.
Yeah, to elevate or to,
the heart of a man will be elevated.
yeah.
And before honor, humility. I was totally blanking on the word.
You're just saying that, no. And before honor, humility. Yeah. Okay. I translated it here as before breaking, the heart of man will become haughty, because gova lev is just Indian for haughty. Right? It literally means high, but and then before honor, humility. Okay, good. Quick translation, minimalist thingy here. So there's no Metzudas Zion, I checked. Targum, I think, is just straight up Aramaic translation. You tell me if you see anything fishy. Kadam Tavra Yisromam Li Beit Gavra. Before breaking, the heart of a man will become haughty. Ukdam Yikara Anvanasusa. And before, Yikara is just a translation of kavod, and Anvanasusa is a translation of humility. I don't see anything here.
Like word for word.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, so I'm just going to delete that then. And then Sa'dya Gaon, who again you don't have here, he says, Achare Asher, I think I did a typo here. Achare Asher Yigva Lev Ha'adam Hashever, the Achare Ha'anava Hakavod.
Yeah, that's syntactically how I built this sentence in my head.
Yes, yeah, I think so, right? So how would we translate that? So after a person's heart becomes haughty is breaking, right? Wait, hold on. Type this. Oh no, what did I do here? After a person's heart becomes haughty, there is breaking, I guess. V'achrei ha'anava kavod, and after humility is honor. Yeah. Okay, and then
I was thinking of it opposite.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So yeah, I also happen to think about it the way that you did, but it definitely, you have to modify the. How are you thinking of it?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it like shiver produces haughtiness somehow.
Okay, so that's interesting. Shiver produces haughtiness.
I don't know what that would mean, but that's how I was reading.
Does that fit into the pasuk?
Lifnei
shiver.
Like when you're in a situation of shiver,
yeah,
you'll be haughty. And if
situation
of kavod.
Okay. All right, hear that. Okay, good. So we'll tackle that in 1 second. I'll just read. The Art Scroll says, prior to his destruction, a man's heart grows haughty, but prior to humility, prior to honor, there's humility. Living Knox says, preceding ruin, a man's heart becomes haughty, but preceding honor, there's humility. I'm going to delete that because it's the same as Art Scroll, and ruin is not shever. I don't think. I think breaking is much more of a literal translation. And then Alter says, before a downfall, a man's heart is proud, and before honor, humility. Yeah, fine. I'm going to delete that also. Yeah. Do you know what English proverb I was thinking of here? I think there is one that actually
pride goeth before.
Yeah, pride goeth before the fall, and I'm pretty sure that does come from Mishlei, because I think that's a Bible saying that people know, But I think there's actually goeth, yes. I do think though that there's another pasuk that says that more explicitly. Okay, fine. So let's just stick with what we got here. Okay, so what are the questions? So one question is, how do we read the pasuk, right?
Yeah. Well, my question is, how is that reading it?
Yeah, say what you say one more time. I want to look at the pasuk as you say it.
Yeah. Okay. So in the presence of breaking, the heart becomes haughty.
Ooh, okay.
In the presence of kavod, there's an up.
Okay, that's a creative translation.
So
okay, fine. All right, that's clear express also. I'm actually going to write that down because we see it. In the presence of breaking, a man's heart will become haughty. That's interesting. Okay, and in the presence of honor, there is humility. I mean, the second one. Second one makes more sense intuitively. Right. That when you're confronted with something that is extremely, has a lot of kavod, then it does humble you. But the first one's harder to see. Yeah. Okay. All right. Fine. All right. What are the questions here?
My mind just came up with the shot according to the
Oh, okay. Hold on for 1 second. Yeah. I mean, the questions here are going to be basic, right? So what is the cause and effect relationship here in each half? Right. Or what's the scenario even, right? I don't even know how to divide these questions because these are all very similar. Okay. What is the relationship between the two halves?
Who's it talking to?
Who's it talking to?
What was it, Havamina?
Yeah. What's the Havamina? That's a good one.
Much like the practical representation.
Yeah.
It seems to be like explaining us that like.
Okay. Yeah. This is fairly easy to ask questions on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
your theory on Zevs?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the Lithnate is someone else. So when you see someone else's downfall, you get like you say, oh, I would never make that mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and so you become haughty.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see someone else who's succeeding, then when you compare yourself to them, it's in a negative light, and so you become more humble.
Let me think that through for 1 second here. So when you see someone breaking, then that triggers a haughtiness reaction of, like I would never do that, or like fault, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or just maybe just even on a simpler, a more base level, I guess, like, you rejoice like, that guy, and like that's also a type of haughtiness, like that's what Chazal always cautioning us of being miskabed b'kolon chavera, right? Is taking pride in someone else's downfall.
Yeah.
Okay, that works. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, and then what was the second half? Is when someone is
when you see that someone else is being successful and exalted, then when you compare yourself to them, it casts you in a negative light, and so they'll humble you.
okay. So let's take that and now try to figure out what the practical idea is. Okay, it's a good reading now. Yeah. So the difficulty here is that would be one of these pasukim where it's just pointing out a phenomenon, right? And then we have to, in other words, he's not giving any indication of what to do or not to do. Like according to the straight reading, like the normal reading, not to call you abnormal, but according to the normal, the standard reading, the implication clearly has something to do with like not being haughty,
Yeah.
But like saying is implying don't be haughty, but yeah.
Well, I think I'd say that is that I think there's the inclination for a person to compare themselves to shever, not to kavod, because that's
that gives you the high, the literal high of your lave, right?
It's painful to compare yourself to someone who's great.
Yeah.
But there's a great satisfaction in comparing yourself to someone who's lowly.
Right.
So it's saying that it's cautioning that when you if you do that, then you're gonna become haughty, and with all of the
trappings
of that brings,
yeah,
which I'm sure he talked about in another
right.
Psukim. But then, if you compare yourself to someone who is like above you, then that will help you orient yourself properly.
Okay, all right, I'm liking this. Let me just expand on the first half according to that approach. That let's just think for a second. What is wrong with what's wrong with the mistake in the first half? Like what is irrational about it? So you said one thing.
Yeah, it's
irrational or impractical. I think we should look for both things.
Yeah. You're focusing on a specific flaw that the person has.
Yeah.
As an isolated thing, as opposed to one of a list of possible flaws that a person can have.
Yeah.
So you say, oh, I don't have that particular thing. Let's say I'm not bad with numbers.
Right.
So I would never. So I'm so much better than this person, but you're bad with.
Right. So in other words, yeah. So the mistake is that you're translating a particular deficiency to an overall level assessment of yourself. Like this person, slipped on a banana peel, therefore I am superior. Right. And that it's the, in other words, that's the feeling of the Gova Lev is I am better. It becomes an I thing as opposed to a particular. Yeah. All right. That's good. Yeah. That's one irrationality.
You don't say I'm better with numbers. You say I'm better than he is.
Right. That's true.
But that could also happen the other way in the second half of the pasuk.
Yeah.
you know, you see a guy who's like really, like, let's say rich or something,
Right.
you know,
So
good at a particular activity.
Right. So that's why I liked how you put the second half, because even though that is true, you can harness that feeling in the second half to better yourself, you know, like
you say, this guy is a diligent worker and I'm not, I'm lacking in that.
Right.
And so then that pushes you to work harder. And try to correct whatever it is that's making you not the same level of kavod.
Right. I mean, I agree with you that it can be like just an inferiority complex when you see so-and-so is good at this and I'm just a low life, you know, like people could say that. I just don't think that that's what the pasuk is saying. And like, I can defend it also by saying that, like, I think there's a difference between, I mean, this is my working definition, but the difference between anava and shiflus ruach. Like shiflus ruach is much more like or dal ruach or shever ruach, like there are all these things. That's much more of like a bad self-image or like a, self-esteem thing. Whereas anava is like an accurate understanding of yourself. You know, that's my understanding of like, you know, ish moshe anav ma'od mikol hadam. You recognize what you actually are.
I also say from the pasuk, it's a person who can either become yigbalev or anava.
Mm-hmm.
So if he has an inferiority complex, even when he sees shever, he's gonna like be thinking about if they're like he's not gonna have that like that same sort of reaction, or he might not.
Right.
And this is combating that potential like pitfall.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the first half also. I think another irrational thing, I think in many cases, it's just false what you say. Like the feeling that like this couldn't happen to me, or I couldn't do this. I think in many cases it's just straight up false. Like you are, let's say like someone, I don't know, say like someone, you know, gets into a car accident by doing something reckless, you know? So you say like, well, you know, I'm a careful driver. Like I would never do that. Well, yeah, but also you have the potential to be distracted. And like, if you were distracted, then you might do that, you know, or like if you know, or maybe they got into the accident because of some misassessment about probabilities, and like, yeah, you know, maybe you wouldn't have gotten into that accident, but like, do you say that you don't misassess probabilities, you know, or someone embarrasses themselves, you know, and they don't realize like what they were going to, you also do, you know, so it's just like a false, it's just a false extrapolation that like, you know, that this can't happen to me, or that I wouldn't do this, or I'm not subject to this, or I don't have this fault, you know, in many cases. I'm not saying all cases. Another thing I think is that it is, I think the whole value system of a relative value system of like ranking yourself or viewing yourself as better or worse, that itself is like a distortion, you know, like that's just not how things work in reality in terms of, it's not a competition, you know, like, I mean, this is related to your first point of like, every person has many different qualities, but like the whole thing of I am better than this person, like not only is it wrong to go from particular to general, but the general framework is also just a fantasy. Like I am a superior person. What does that even mean? You know?
Yeah. Do you think this pasuk is addressing that, or is it just hard? Is it making use of that frame?
Are you asking about specifically in the second half because it utilizes it?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I mean, I think it is pointing out the flaw of it. I still like the way your original statement is that it's pointing out the flaw of it, but realizing that this is how we think of things. So if you're going to think about things in this way, then you might as well do it in a way that lends itself to self-improvement. You know.
Yeah. I would also say, in terms of the point that you made, that it's not like trying to remove a person from this framework, but it is setting a person up to be able to like remove themselves from it, because when you're when like it's a framework that like puts you in a favorable light and it makes you feel good, it's going to be hard to like shift away from that mentality because it feels really good.
Yeah.
When you recognize that, when you look at like the kavod and see that's the and see how you are efficient in your ranking system, you're more inclined to shift away from that.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a good point.
I don't think it's specifically saying like that you shouldn't. I think it is operating within this framework, but it does help in terms of
yeah.
But it doesn't seem so practical. It seems like more of like a perfection kind of thing.
Well, I guess the practical thing is you do see people break, fall, stumble, whatever. And like the question is, what are you going to do with it? And so because there's this natural tendency to use that as like a stepping stone for your own ego, as opposed to using it as a way to like to be constructive in, like orienting yourself in a realistic way towards looking at human mistakes and like recognizing your own place. It's like, it's not a particular decision-making. It's not saying do this, but it is saying, given the fact that you're going to react to seeing people fall or seeing people who are great, and you're going to have this like relative ego, self-evaluation response, be aware that there are responses like that are detrimental to you because they bring you out of reality and cause you to make these mistakes. And like, that just fuels your haughtiness. And then there are ways to look at it that you can mitigate that. And like if every time you saw someone make a mistake, you try to identify a time where you have made that mistake or you are prone to making that mistake, what would happen? You would make that mistake less and your gaiva would go down, and you would, and you would find areas where like you can work on things on your practical decision making, So I think it is practical in that sense. It's just a very broad way.
Got it.
All right, I think that's a good idea, and we'll now like pocket that and then see when we go to the meforshim, see if anyone says that. Let's go to the standard reading now, and see if we can get something. And there's one important question that we didn't list. Okay, lifnei shever yigba lev ish. If you just take that as straight as possible, it kind of implies that every shever is caused by haughtiness or preceded by haughtiness, and that seems false. Yeah. So the question. So I'm just gonna list that question here. Okay, is that the pasuk? Sorry, the pasuk. The pasuk I can't type today. Seems to imply that every breaking is preceded by govalev. That's not true. And similarly, doesn't it also seem to imply that before every kavod is anava? And that's certainly not true, right? There are lots of people who get kavod and didn't have anava beforehand. So either what we need to do, we need to figure out, is there a case or is there a sense to understand it where that is absolutely true? Okay. Or if not, if it refers to specific types of sheva or specific types of kavod, so then why does the pasuk express it as an absolute?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, does anyone disagree with the fact that it's not literally true? Because I'm saying like you could have a shever that is totally not your fault, right? Or that is your fault but didn't stem from gofal lev.
And shever, we're still saying is like a mess up,
some sort of some sort. I would say it's some sort of harm that you suffer.
Uh-huh.
You can ask the question like, is shever a more specific thing? But I'm taking it right now as just general term for breaking.
Okay.
Yeah. You got me thinking about that food thing. I don't think anyone's gonna say it means food, but it's an interesting question.
In the presence of food.
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the strength of this question. Yeah, you didn't eat breakfast yet. The strength of this question, I think, is why Sa'adya flips it. He says, "Achrei asher yigba lev ha'adam hashever," meaning it's much more reasonable to say that if you are haughty, then you will suffer breaking, than to say that if you suffer breaking, it must have been because you're haughty.
So then the question is, why does it say it like this?
Yeah. So well, again, either. I can see two routes. Either the pasuk is describing something which is absolutely true, and therefore we'd have to limit our definition of shever, or it's not saying it always happens. It's saying that it that high probability happens wherever, but why is it expressing it as if it's an absolute? Like what idea is coming across there? I just want to repeat. For those who are only involved in this and not the one last night, I want to reread that Reuben Kaspi that I read because it's on this point here. Hold on, let me just find it.
I have a thought about
sure. Yeah, this is an important methodology point. So this is the Reuben Kaspi on Mishlei Yud Aleph, Perak Yud pasuk aleph. What?
10:1.
10:1. Yes. So he said, and this is his Pirush Hasheni. So he said, oops, sorry, this is Ibn Ezra Pirush Hasheni. Oh, I'm on Precedes, that's why I can't find it. Yud. Pirush Hasheni. Okay, so the Ibn Kaspi says, Vida od ki gezeros is a sefer stamios. The statements in this, here he means statements in this sefer are absolute. Okay, Ritzoni she'ein bam choma, that they're not limited. They don't have a wall. Okay, meaning they just state them generally. Okay, v'hakavana barov elu shehem kololos. The majority of these statements are universals. Ki kavanasa b'amra ben chacham. So, for example, when it says in pasuk aleph ben chacham yisamach av, kol ben chacham, it means every ben chacham. Okay. V'chein hakavana berubam shehem efsharios meodios, and then it's true. Most of the psukim, it's not that it is always true, but it's efsharios meodios, high probability. Okay. V'im be'emes yish be'zeh hasefer she'ena meodios, but some of the statements in the sefer are not highly probable. V'nachon shehem mimin ha'efshari b'shaveh, they're equally probable. So they'll express them in universal absolute terms, but they're equal probability
Of happening or not happening.
of happening or not happening. O mimin al asher al hama'at, or some of them are even not very probable, but they'll still express it in absolute ways. Uvaksasam yivayer v'yomar. Some of them it'll be explicit and it'll say yesh. And this is Sa'dya Gaon's rule. He says when you see a pasuk that says yesh, then it's talking about a very specific scenario that is not like a general statement, you know. But according to this Ibn Kaspi, so then when you the general format of a proverb will be an absolute statement. And some of them means it's always true. Some of them are high probability. Some of them are equal probability, and some of them are minute, low chances. But they're all expressed absolutely. And so you have to think in your mind, like, which of the categories is it? And my question here is premised on the fact. So just to translate that to here, is this absolute? Or is it not? And if it's not absolute, then why does it say it absolutely? And he might not agree with that question I just asked. I think it's an important question because I think that like the way that a proverb is formulated has an effect on the way that you like think about it or implement it. So I think like, let's say this is not true of every case. So then why does he feel the need to say it in every case? And I gave an example last night. I said like if you swim with sharks, you'll get bitten. Why do we formulate that as an absolute thing? It doesn't happen all the time. Well, because the consequences are so severe that you need to think about it as though like it's going to happen all the time, or two wrongs don't make a right, like that's another one. Well, sometimes I can find you cases where they do, but we there it's because there's such a psychological temptation to view that two wrongs do make a right, so we need to counteract the psychological by formulating it in an absolute way. So I think anytime you ask like, why is it formulated this way, it can give you further insight into the idea. And I said that as an absolute statement. I don't mean every time. Yeah.
So I have a thought about Sa'dya Gaon.
Yeah.
And how we can explain the way the pasuk is formulated.
Go for it.
So in a practical sense is that it's a hardness causes breaking and another causes cover.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't worked out how that works yet. Like that's like the phenomenon that he's talking about.
Yeah.
And the reason it's phrased in the reverse is that when you look at your own breaking, you should think to yourself, this was probably caused by my own haughtiness. And then reflect on that, even though it won't always have been because of that. It's thinking about it in these ways that you see the breaking, and then you reflect. Then that should cause you to think about your own haughtiness.
Yeah.
And when you want kavod, you should think about then. When you're looking for that, you should think about how it's caused by another, and try to get that.
Yeah. Okay. The second one is less obvious than the first one. Well, just to expand on the first one here, can we identify? We didn't define Goval Lev, so can we just come up with a definition of Goval Lev right now? And then to understand what you're saying about how like it might be caused by Goval Lev.
So when your heart jumps to the throat.
Like a like inflated sense of one's own like importance or like something like that.
Yeah.
Superiority.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. I would say I conceive of it in just a slightly broader term, of which that is a subcategory, is thinking that you are greater than you actually are, and the two subcategories of that are either thinking you're greater than you actually are relative to like just in isolation, meaning like I think I'm a great tennis player, and really I'm not as great as I think, and then the other one is thinking that you are greater. Maybe there's three categories depending on how you want to categorize it. The other one is thinking you're greater in reality, like you have a more central place in reality than you actually do. So that's like the seal who thinks that everything revolves around him, So that's not saying like I have a particular quality that I think my IQ is like 500 and really it's 50, it's thinking my place in reality is more prominent than it actually is.
Meaning that everything like happens
for me or should happen for me, or like things should not happen to me because I'm me.
Mm-hmm.
That's like another type of like importance. And then the third type, which you could categorize as like I don't know, up to you whether you want to categorize, is I think in this relative value system we were talking about before, where you think I'm greater than other people, you're comparing yourself to others, which itself is a whole fantasy thing, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's flesh out what you said in practical terms. So when you make a mistake, so then you're saying that the default assumption should be like, this came from my gaiva, or my gova lave in one of these three areas, right? So either I made this mistake, I shouldn't even say making a mistake. When something bad happens to you, right? Then you should ask yourself, does this stem from a species of gaiva? Did this happen to me because I misassessed my own abilities in a particular area? Did it happen to me because I assumed that I had occupied a greater place in reality than I actually did, and therefore like took for granted that things would work out in my favor, or like assumed I'd be immune to certain things, or like something like that, or was it because I viewed myself as greater than other people? I think that one's actually not as relevant in this as I thought, but the first two definitely. Yeah.
Like let's say a person like catches COVID. And,
Yeah.
And they're because they like weren't so careful.
Right.
So then they should think like, oh, was I not careful enough because I felt that I deserved to be immune. Right.
Or was it just that I thought I was being very careful and I actually wasn't being very careful, and I misassessed that. Yeah.
And that would be the first kind of go where you like think that you're really good at assessing.
That would be I thought I was more careful than I was, and then the other more underlying one is like I thought that because I am me, then I can't get COVID, or I don't need to be as careful.
Right.
Like that one could, what you were saying is that one can lead to the other one, like
other people get it.
Yeah, the threshold is much lower for me because I'm me, and therefore I don't have to be as careful, or I don't have, yeah, the kavod is harder, right? So say how you wanted to broach it again for the kavod.
I would say that when a person wants kavod.
When they want kavod, then they should think that how would a nava lead to that? Yeah, okay. So I think I can supply that based on the definition of a nava I gave. That a nava is an accurate idea, a realistic idea of the self. Okay, so I guess we have to define what kind of kavod we're talking about, right? Are we talking about objective greatness, or are we talking about like people looking at you as great?
I assume there's people looking at you as great.
I also assume that, but now I'm wondering maybe it doesn't work out that way, because you can definitely. I don't think you need actual anava to get kavod from people, just because you see people doing it all the time,
Yeah, but I think
you don't need
there's a lot of
slaves to have a shiur either.
No, but there we are saying though that the majority of shiur, there's a high probability that if you do experience a shiur, then it came from some sort of gova lave. In fact, we don't even have to say high probability. If you defined shiur as a bad outcome of a decision, as opposed to like, in other words, like you could, the most broad thing of shiur is any sort of thing that debilitates you. So like a storm happened and my house caved in on me. Like, you know, like that could be a shever. Or you could define shever as like a bad result of a decision, you know, like the opposite of like a hatzlacha, you know?
I was just thinking, in terms of the pasuk, wouldn't it make more sense if shever was the opposite of kavod?
Yes, structurally it would, yeah. Right. So that, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it changes the idea.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
I mean, the opposite could be the effective haughtiness and the effective.
Yeah.
Effective humility.
Am I blanking on something? What is the opposite Hebrew word for hatzlacha? How do you say failure in Hebrew? In biblical Hebrew?
Don't know.
Shever. Maybe, I don't know.
Probably cruel.
Right? Because hatzlacha means success. Is there like not a word for failure? Am I just...
We don't have a word for failure.
It's less I we don't have to take it separate. How about just a question like why is it talking about it specifically in terms of the social realm? Seems like kavod and shever.
Well, according to you, you mean the terms, yeah.
Terms.
So that I think that's why my mind is inclined to think about this as, and I realize this doesn't quite fit with the word kavod, but like objective greatness, as opposed, because shever we're saying is, according to this second approach, shever is not in the social realm. Shever is just you fail at something or you suffer something.
Yeah.
So kavod would be, and see, okay, let me try this out, and we'll just ignore the fact that kavod sounds like a social term right now. That if anava is an accurate knowledge of the self, and so that means two things. If we translate this based on our other way of looking at gaiva or of gova lev, is having an accurate assessment of your abilities, knowing what your limits and your weaknesses and strengths are, and then also having an accurate idea of what your place is in reality. Okay, so if that's what anava is, then definitively any greatness you achieve is going to have to come from that. You know, like any true, in other words, if you seek greatness, you have to have an accurate sense of who you are. So any path to pursuing objective greatness that is not via accurate self-knowledge will not be successful, because you're building it off of something that you don't actually have. If you try to audition for America's Got Talent and you don't have an accurate idea of what your talents are, so then your chances plummet, you know, your chances go way down, you know. Or if you try to start a business and you have this premise that like, I will succeed because I'm destined for success, you know, some sort of like aggrandized idea about what your place is in reality, then that's going to fail. I mean, I don't mean it's going to fail immediately. Like it could take a long time for it to fail, but it's going to fail. So realizing, so what, if so, okay, so then what this pasuk is doing is it's showing that there's an inextricable link between accurate self-knowledge and success and inaccurate self-knowledge and failure. That whenever you fail, chances are it came from inaccurate self-knowledge. And again, by self-knowledge, I mean like in both senses of the term. And then when you, and then if you seek success, then like, it's in your best interest to maintain as adequate an idea of, as accurate an idea of self-knowledge as you can, you know, of what your abilities are and what your place is in reality. And that might be also why it phrases it in terms of the, the lifnei part could either be because practically speaking, like it's just trying to make it so that this was a habit of mind, you know, that you're always asking yourself like, oh, this must have, I experienced shever, I must have had a goa lev. Or it's just saying that these two are so, I mean, I'm saying the same thing. These two are so linked that it's as if it's cause and effect, you know?
Just to flesh out one aspect of the anava.
Yeah, oh, sorry, before you, like for example, when you say where there's smoke, there's fire. Like where there's shever, then there's gova lev. Like it's just like, it's trying to create that like, this is how the phenomenon is, you know? Yeah.
Because you could have smoke that isn't that, but
right.
Like, when you see smoke, your first instinct should be there's probably a fire.
Mm-hmm.
So just about the another thing. I think just to talk out a point that I think you made a little more. When if you are haughty and so you, let's say you have co-sleep, and so you're misassessing your own abilities. So then you might think, I'm good at, let's say, I'm good at skills A and B, whereas in reality, you're really good at A,
Yeah.
but you're not actually good at B. You're actually bad at B.
Right.
But you don't recognize that.
Yeah.
So then you're gonna try A and B equally, and so then when you're gonna try something that's beyond your abilities, and then that's gonna cause failure. Whereas if you were like candid with yourself about the fact that you're not good at B, then you can be upfront about that both in terms of like to yourself and also to others, and then you won't be put in a position where like people where like you're expecting of yourself or other people are expecting of you to perform one of the skills that you are supposedly good at but aren't.
So I understand what you're saying. I think I missed where what the first move was, where this is coming from. You started saying that if you misassess your skills, then there's a chance that you're going to like think that you're equally good at A and B, but then really the proportions are different.
Yeah.
Is that just like lack of assessment ability in general, or like, because to me what it's
I'm saying that it sounds like it's haughtiness in B. That's what I'm saying.
It's haughtiness in B. Okay, because what I thought as you were describing that case is like, that sounds like the mistake that we talked about in your previous interpretation, where instead of viewing each of your qualities as its own thing, you view yourself in aggregate. So like, instead of saying I happen to be good at A and bad at B, then you just meld it all into one. Like, I am good at this overall activity that encompasses A and B, and you have less scrutiny about like the particular skills that comprise it, Yeah.
I'd say it's both of those things.
Yeah.
But I'm focusing more on the fact that you think you're much better at B than you actually are.
Yeah.
Because you're not willing to accept that you're not willing to like think about yourself as like being bad at something. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying that I think it is more related to your overall self-image as opposed to your misassessment of particulars. Yeah.
And so in the particulars, because you have a misassessment of yourself, you're going to like try a skill that you just don't have.
Yeah.
And so either you're going to put yourself into like, either you're gonna do it for yourself or others are gonna expect it to be because you say that you're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to fail and have all the consequences of failure. Whereas if you recognize that you're bad at it, then either when the situation comes up for yourself, you're going to say, I'm going to try to figure out some way that either someone else can do this for me or to like avoid it because I'm bad at this. And then, or if someone else asks you to do it, then you'll be upfront about it because you recognize that.
Right. Okay, good. Let's. We didn't get to in meforshim or my interpretation yet, but I think we got two good ideas. So let's spend tomorrow on this also. Okay, so we can start by reviewing what we did and then look at meforshim. Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Yeah. More.